If you love Paul Harvey stories and the rest of the story, subscribe now. Ben and Carrie stood on the front lawn in what they had hoped would be their dream house. But instead it had become increasingly apparent to them the dilapidated old thing was more the sort of place where nightmares were born. Perhaps they might tear it down. It had been suggested just demolish it and start over. After all, they had been informed it would cost at least $35,000 just to fix it up. In 1889, that was an incredible fortune. But then both agreed there was the greatest liability of all. The folks who had lived there before had committed the unforgivable blunder of installing electricity. That's right. Electric power and light were more or less widely available in America in those days. But Ben and Carrie, slightly past middle-aged children of the early 19th century, were staunchly opposed, as were many of their generation, opposed to what they perceived as the needless risks of electrification in the home. Electricity starts fires, does it not? Carrie murmured to Ben, and solemnly Ben agreed. But the rest of the story is that the couple did keep the house. Carrie's first task to subdue the rats. The house was overrun with rats, so many hundreds in fact, that she brought in trained dogs and ferrets to combat them. Meanwhile, Ben attended to what he considered the first order of business, the candles. He made certain that the pantry cupboard was loaded with candles. If the family needed light, he declared, there would always be plenty of candles on hand. Of course, there were numerous splendid chains hanging from electrical fixtures everywhere, and yet each was eyed suspiciously by Ben and or Carrie as they passed. One could be shocked, even killed. Someone had once told them simply by touching those innocent-appearing chains. By Christmas time, Ben and Carrie were rather well settled in their new home. Repairs costing thousands had already been made on the electrified monster, and yet so much money had been spent that none was left over to pay for removal of all of those confounded electric wires. Now Ben loved Christmas. Stiff and reserved all of the rest of the year, each Christmas time he nevertheless dressed up like Santa Claus for the children. A sumptuously decorated Christmas tree was important to Ben. But when somebody suggested putting electric lights on the tree that year, Ben exploded. After all of the time and the effort and the cash that had gone into that falling down rat trap of a house, he was not about to burn it down with electricity. Not now. He would do as he had always done. He would illuminate his Christmas tree with sensible, safe candles. Now, even though Ben would live on into the next century, nobody ever managed to change his mind about that dangerous, untested, newfangled source of power and light, electricity. And so it was that Ben and Carrie, Benjamin and Caroline Harrison, went to great lengths to make their home a pleasant one, and yet never really enjoyed it during the 4 years that they lived there, because somehow they felt that the future was an unwelcome intrusion on a rat-infested, dilapidated, and yet dignified old mansion, which we call the White House. For Carrie and Ben, for First Lady and President of the United States, Benjamin Harrison,